We live in a culture that often confuses self-love with indulgence. The narrative is everywhere. Book a luxury spa day, take a long vacation, buy yourself the latest skincare trend, and you'll suddenly feel whole. While those things may feel good in the moment, they are temporary escapes, not permanent solutions. Self-love is not found in a grand gesture. It is built in the smallest, most consistent actions you take for yourself every single day. It's not glamorous, and it rarely shows up on social media feeds, but it's the kind of love that rewires your identity at its core. The truth is, the way you treat yourself in the quiet, uncelebrated moments of your daily life is what actually defines the way you see yourself. You don't build trust by saying, "I love me" once in a while when life feels overwhelming. You build trust the same way you would with anyone else, by showing up consistently, by following through on the little things, and by creating evidence that you are worthy of care and respect. Think about how relationships grow. They don't flourish because of a single expensive dinner date or a once-a-year surprise vacation. They thrive because of the tiny acts of kindness, the daily check-ins, the listening ear, the consistent showing up even when it's inconvenient. Your relationship with yourself works the exact same way. Small daily habits so small they almost feel insignificant, are the seeds of transformation. When you water them daily, they bloom into a life that feels grounded, confident, and full of self-respect. What makes small habits so powerful is that they bypass the resistance we often feel toward change. If you tell yourself you're going to overhaul your entire lifestyle in one weekend, your brain immediately resists. It's overwhelming. But if you commit to something as simple as drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning, writing down one win from your day, or speaking kindly to yourself in the mirror, it feels doable. And because it's doable, you stick with it. Repetition is what turns small actions into part of your identity. And identity is where transformation lives. Here's where the real shift happens. Every time you keep one of those tiny promises to yourself, you create proof. That proof becomes evidence that you can trust yourself. When you trust yourself, you no longer need external validation to feel good. You no longer chase love from others in a desperate attempt to fill a void. Instead, you start generating love from within, and that changes how you show up in every area of your life. Consider this. You wake up one morning and decide you're going to start a new workout program. You throw yourself into it for 3 days straight, then you miss a day, feel guilty, and abandon the whole thing. That's the cycle most people live in. But if instead you had started with the commitment to move your body for just 5 minutes a day, the bar would have been so low that you couldn't fail. And when you prove to yourself, day after day, that you can follow through, those 5 minutes naturally grow into 10, 20, even an hour. But it doesn't start with the big leap. It starts with the smallest, simplest step. This is why self-love through small habits works. Because self-love is not a declaration, it's a practice. It's not about how loud you shout affirmations when you're feeling low. It's about how consistently you show up for yourself when no one else is watching. That's the difference between fleeting motivation and deep transformation. Think of small habits like bricks. One brick doesn't make a house, but when you lay a brick every single day without fail, eventually you create a solid foundation. Over time, those bricks become walls, and those walls become the structure of your life. The small habit is the brick, and the big shift is the home you eventually get to live in. A home built on self-trust, self-respect, and self-love. And the beauty of these habits is that they are unique to you. For one woman, it may be writing 3 lines in a gratitude journal each morning. For another, it may be setting aside 2 minutes to breathe deeply before diving into her busy day. For someone else, it could be committing to going to bed 10 minutes earlier than usual. None of these habits are earth-shattering. No one will clap for you, and you may even be tempted to dismiss them as not enough. But here's the truth. Transformation is always invisible in the beginning. It's not until you look back weeks or months later that you realize how much has shifted, how much stronger you feel, and how much more you believe in your own worth. The shift isn't only internal, it spills into your external life. When you begin showing up for yourself in these micro ways, you begin carrying yourself differently. You walk into rooms with more grounded confidence because you know you can rely on yourself. You start making decisions from a place of self-respect instead of desperation or fear. You notice that relationships around you shift too because people can sense when someone values themselves and they respond to that energy. Another important piece to understand is that self-love habits are not about perfection. You will miss days. You will forget. And that's okay. The shift happens not because you never fail, but because you keep coming back. The very act of returning to yourself, even after slipping, is itself an act of self-love. It's a declaration that you are worth the effort, even when it's messy. This process also dismantles one of the biggest lies we've been taught, that you need to feel good about yourself before you can act like you love yourself. The opposite is true. You don't wait for the feeling. You create the feeling by acting first. You do the small habit even when you don't feel like it, and over time, your feelings catch up to your actions. This is why small habits matter so much. They don't rely on willpower or fleeting emotion. They're steady, reliable, and they build momentum whether you're motivated or not. So when you think about self-love, stop looking for the next big thing. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect day, the perfect plan. The transformation you're craving is already within reach, and it's hiding in the smallest choices you make today. Drink the water, write the gratitude line, speak kindly to yourself in the mirror, move your body for 5 minutes. These habits might look small on the outside, but on the inside, they are rewiring the way you see yourself. They are teaching you that you matter. They are reminding you that you are capable. They are proving to you that you are worth showing up for, day after day, moment after moment. That's the shift that changes everything. There's a myth that has held so many women back from living the life they truly want, and it's the belief that you need to feel ready before you can begin, that you need to feel confident before you can show up boldly, that you need to feel worthy before you can start acting like someone who deserves good things. The problem with this belief is that feelings are unreliable. They shift with your mood, with your hormones, with the weather, with the comment someone made about you in passing. If you wait until you feel worthy, you'll wait your entire life. Real change doesn't come from feelings. It comes from action. And action doesn't flow from motivation, it flows from identity. The way you see yourself, the identity you hold on to in the privacy of your own mind, is the single greatest driver of your behavior. If your identity is wrapped up in being someone who is unworthy, broken, or not enough, then no amount of motivational quotes or temporary inspiration will carry you through when life gets hard. Motivation is fleeting. It's like a sugar high. It spikes, gives you a jolt of energy, and then crashes. Identity, on the other hand, is steady. It's who you believe yourself to be. And when you align your habits with that identity, you no longer need to summon motivation. You act in accordance with who you are. This is why people who try to change their lives by relying on motivation almost always fail. They start with excitement, they make promises to themselves, they ride the wave of enthusiasm for a few days, or maybe even a few weeks. Then they hit resistance. Resistance is inevitable. It shows up as exhaustion, distraction, or the voice in your head that says, "You don't really need to do this today." If your habits are built on the shaky ground of motivation, resistance knocks the entire foundation down. But if your habits are grounded in identity, resistance doesn't win. Because you're no longer doing something just to get an external result. You're doing it because it's who you are. Think about the difference between someone who says, "I'm trying to quit, smoking, and someone who says, I'm not a smoker. The first person is clinging to motivation. They're trying, they're hoping, they're pushing against temptation. The second person is speaking from identity. They've already decided who they are, and their actions flow naturally from that decision. That's the power of identity. It shapes not just what you do, but how you see yourself doing it. When it comes to self-love, this shift is everything. Most women believe they need to feel good about themselves before they can act like they love themselves. But the truth is the reverse. You start acting like you love yourself before you feel it. And through consistent habits, you prove your worth to yourself. That proof builds a new identity, a woman who is worthy of care, respect, and love. And once that identity solidifies, the actions become automatic. Let's make this real. Imagine a woman who has been stuck in self-doubt for years. She wakes up, looks in the mirror, and her first thought is critical. She drags through her day, taking care of everyone else while ignoring her own needs. She promises herself she'll start prioritizing her health or her happiness next week. But the week never comes. She waits to feel ready. She waits to feel confident. And because those feelings never arrive, nothing changes. Now imagine if she flipped the script. Instead of waiting, she decided today that she is someone who respects herself. That's her new identity. And to align with that identity, she chooses one small habit to practice every day. Maybe it's moving her body for 10 minutes. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's setting a boundary. At first, it feels awkward. She doesn't believe it fully yet, but she doesn't need to. She's practicing the habit anyway. Every time she keeps that promise, she collects evidence. The evidence says, I am someone who respects herself. The more evidence she gathers, the stronger the identity becomes. Eventually, she doesn't need motivation to keep the habit. It's simply who she is now. She no longer has to push herself to respect her boundaries. She does it automatically because she sees herself as a woman who values her own time. She doesn't have to force herself to show up consistently. She does it because it's her identity, to be reliable to herself. This is how small habits transform into powerful shifts. They reprogram identity, and this identity shift bleeds into every area of life. When you start acting like someone who is worthy, you stop tolerating things that don't align with that worth. You stop entertaining relationships that drain you. You stop accepting less than you deserve at work. You stop sabotaging yourself because you finally see that you are no longer the version of you who tolerates pain for love or hustles for validation. You're no longer trying to earn worth. You already embody it. The most liberating truth is this. You don't need to wait for permission from anyone else to claim this identity. You don't need someone to tell you you're enough. You don't need external applause, and you don't need to feel it before you live it. You can decide right now, in this moment, who you are, and then you can back that decision up with action. The action is what cements the identity. And when identity is in place, motivation is irrelevant. The cycle becomes self-sustaining. Identity fuels action. Action builds evidence. Evidence reinforces identity. Round and round it goes until the gap between who you used to be and who you've become is so wide you hardly recognize the old version of yourself. And it all started not with waiting for a feeling, but with practicing a habit. This is why relying on motivation is such a trap. Motivation is about emotion. Identity is about embodiment. One is temporary, the other is permanent. Motivation can be stolen by a bad day, a careless comment, or a single setback. Identity is immune to those things because it's not about how you feel. It's about who you are. And when you build your habits on identity, you create a foundation that can't be shaken by circumstance. What this really means is that every small action you take is more than just a habit. It's a vote for your future self. When you drink water instead of reaching for the third cup of coffee, you're casting a vote for the identity of someone who takes care of her body. When you turn off your phone before bed instead of scrolling, you're casting a vote for the identity of someone who respects her rest. When you stand up for yourself in a conversation, you're casting a vote for the identity of someone who values her voice. One action by itself may seem small, but over time, those votes accumulate, and the majority wins. Your identity shifts, and your life transforms. The moment you stop waiting to feel worthy and start proving your worth through action, everything changes. Because worth is not something you stumble upon when the stars align. Worth is something you embody through the way you live, one small practice at a time. When you shift your focus from chasing motivation to aligning with identity, you step into a new reality where self-love is not something you have to force. It becomes something you naturally express because it's woven into the fabric of who you are. When people think about changing their lives, they often imagine it has to be some long, drawn-out process. They picture years of therapy, endless hours of self-development, or months of grueling discipline before they start to feel different. But the truth is, transformation doesn't require an eternity. It requires a beginning. And sometimes all it takes is one intentional week to shift momentum in your favor. 7 days. That's it. Not perfection, not a flawless plan, just 7 days of focused, intentional action. Because when you put your attention into that short window, you prove to yourself that change is possible, and you begin to rewire the way you show up for yourself. A week is powerful because it's short enough to feel doable, but long enough to disrupt old patterns. If I told you that you needed to commit for a year, your brain would likely resist. A year feels overwhelming. But 7 days? You can do 7 days. Your brain doesn't panic at the thought of a week. Instead, it begins to open up to the possibility. And once you're in motion, those 7 days become a seed that grows into something much bigger. You're not transforming your life overnight. You're proving to yourself that transformation is within reach. Think about how habits and patterns are formed. The things you do on autopilot, the way you talk to yourself in the mirror, the way you react to stress, the choices you make about food, sleep, or rest, those are all patterns built over time. They feel automatic now because you've repeated them over and over again. But just like you repeated those old patterns into existence, you can begin repeating new ones. A 7-day reset interrupts the autopilot. It forces you to stop running in the background and consciously choose how you want to act. And when you stack 7 days of those conscious choices, you start breaking the grip of your old identity. This doesn't mean you'll have everything figured out in a week. What it means is that in 7 days, you can begin to collect evidence of who you could become. You can see glimpses of a stronger, more confident, more self-respecting version of yourself. And that glimpse is often the spark you need to keep going. People don't fail at change because it's impossible. They fail because they never stay consistent long enough to see proof. A week gives you that proof. A week says, look, I did this. A week says, I can trust myself. The beauty of 7 days is that it removes the pressure of forever. You're not promising that you'll meditate every day for the rest of your life, or that you'll never have another negative thought again. You're simply saying, for the next 7 days, I'm going to show up for myself differently. That's manageable. That's believable. And because it's believable, it's powerful. When you actually complete the 7 days, you carry a sense of accomplishment that you can't fake. You feel it in your bones that you are capable of shifting your life, because you've lived it, even for a short stretch of time. 7 days can reset your energy. Imagine how different you feel after just 1 week of prioritizing sleep, nourishing your body, moving daily, and speaking kindly to yourself. That 1 week won't erase every challenge, but it will give you a taste of clarity, vitality, and focus that you may not have felt in a long time. And once you taste it, you crave more. That craving is momentum. And momentum is what keeps you moving forward long after the 7 days are done. 7 days can reset your confidence. Confidence doesn't come from imagining yourself successful. It comes from proving to yourself through action that you can follow through. Every small commitment you honor becomes a piece of evidence. And in a week, you can gather a surprising amount of evidence. You can look back and say, I said I would show up for myself, and I did. That's where real confidence is born, not in theory, but in practice. 7 days can reset your self-respect. Many women struggle not because they don't know what to do, but because they've broken promises to themselves so many times that they no longer trust their own word. That lack of trust erodes self-respect. But a reset week changes the story. When you say, I'll do this for 7 days, and you actually follow through, you start to rebuild that trust. And with trust comes respect. You begin to see yourself as someone who honors her word. You begin to treat yourself as someone worth showing up for. The reset also works because it creates a pattern interruption. Think about how many of your daily choices are mindless. You wake up and immediately reach for your phone. You scroll, compare yourself, and start the day already behind. You grab quick food that leaves you sluggish. You push through work without a pause for breath. You collapse into bed exhausted, only to repeat it all again. A reset interrupts that autopilot. It forces you to be intentional. Instead of grabbing your phone, maybe you take a moment to write down one thing you're grateful for. Instead of skipping water, you drink a glass first thing. Instead of pushing through exhaustion, you close your eyes and breathe. These little shifts might not seem revolutionary, but they are. Because they tell your brain, we are no longer operating on the old program. We are creating a new one. And in 7 days, you can begin to feel the difference. You notice your inner voice softening. You notice your energy lifting. You notice your confidence rising. Not because everything outside you has changed, but because you have changed how you show up for yourself. That shift in perception is where transformation begins. 7 days also builds momentum because it offers immediate feedback. You don't have to wait months to see results. You feel it quickly. When you take care of yourself, when you keep promises, when you set boundaries, the shift is almost instant. And once you see those results in such a short time, you realize that bigger change is possible. It's not some distant dream. It's within reach. The reason 7 days is enough to spark transformation is because it aligns with how the brain works. The brain thrives on small, repeatable actions. Every time you practice a new habit, you're wiring a new neural pathway. It may not be deeply ingrained after a week, but it exists. And once it exists, it's easier to return to. That's why people who do a reset often find themselves naturally drawn to continue. It's not forced, it's familiar. When you commit to a 7-day reset, you are essentially saying, I'm willing to disrupt the pattern. And disruption is the first step to any kind of growth. Without disruption, you stay stuck in the loop of self-doubt, procrastination, and unworthiness. But with even a short burst of intentional action, you start writing a new script. You start embodying a new story. And the story is one of possibility, of worthiness, of momentum. 7 days may not sound like much, but 7 days is enough to prove to yourself that you can take control back. 7 days is enough to show you that you don't need to be ruled by old habits or old identities. 7 days is enough to reset your energy, your confidence, and your self-respect. And when you've tasted that reset, when you've seen the proof of who you can become, you no longer question if you're capable of change. You know that you are.